was 23 years old when I got a job working overnight at a men's homeless shelter downtown Seattle. I'm a female and not a very big one at that. I have a passion for helping homeless vets and felt comfortable doing the job of kicking out drunk men at 3 a.m. and having odd conversations with drug users. The overnight shift was from 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. There were 30 bunk beds in a large space, so a total of 60 guests each night. One on one end of the large space where there was an eating area and a door to the kitchen. The kitchen space was similar to a public school kitchen, with a door to enter and a roll-up area to serve meals, which was only open for a few hours each night during dinner time. On the other end of the large space was a staff office, which had a small window to look out onto the sea of bunk beds. 2 people worked the overnight shift each night, and most of the shift was sitting and waiting for morning. I'd spend the time doing dishes or some paperwork or getting breakfast prepared. When I first started, I searched the address with a registered sex offender registry so that I knew which guys to avoid at all costs. I got to be friends with some of the guys, and I really enjoyed this job. There was one man at the shelter that no one knew anything about. He was taken care of by the guys there because he was vulnerable and seemed weak. He was a complete mute. The staff only knew his name. His paperwork had barely any information on it. His name was Robin. He spoke to no one, only nodded and gestured. After a few months of working overnight, Robin came into the office when I was working. He sat down at one of the chairs. This wasn't something weird. Lots of guys did this to hang out for a bit with staff members. But Robin grabbed a piece of paper and pencil and wrote, "How old are you?" on it, and handed it to me. I told him 23, and he nodded and left. His case manager was thrilled. He thought maybe he had picked me to talk to, and I would be able to get the general background information about Robin that they needed. My coworker, a female, said she didn't trust it. I agreed with my coworker. I kept my distance from Robin, but the next night he spoke some words to me. I tried to get his background information, but he wasn't interested in that. It was a short conversation about nothing, and he went back to mute. The following night I came into work and read the update log. Robin was at the hospital getting deloused because he had scabies. I was incredibly relieved because my coworker was a frail older woman, and us against 60 men didn't seem safe. About 3 a.m., Robin came back to the shelter. He asked for help to get a towel so he could shower, then used his words to ask me if he could talk to me when he was done. I agreed, and I told him to be in the kitchen doing dishes. An hour or so later, he was at the kitchen door. He came in, and I instantly felt uncomfortable. We were alone in the kitchen with one exit. He leaned against a table directly across from me. He put his hands down his pants, looked up at me and smiled, then looked back at his crotch, then back at me. I told him, "Seriously? No," and booked it past him and out the kitchen door to the office. Soon he arrived in the office and sat down. My coworker was asleep at the desk, so I was still alone. I watched as Robin left the kitchen and went to his bed. My next few shifts, my boss had to be present and tell Robin to leave me alone. He would still silently lurk around me. I only worked a few more shifts before transferring to the women's shelter. This happened when I was 11 years old. I have an older brother who was 16 at the time and 2 younger brothers. My parents would often go out for dinner on a Friday and leave us at home with some hired videos, pizza, and my brother in charge. My brother would often leave to his friend's place down the road on the same street and then leave me in charge. I liked this because I liked being in charge and got to choose the movies. This Friday night it was stormy and raining on and off. There was some lightning and thunder around. I was watching a movie and my two brothers were playing in the carport garage. It was a large open-plan space you can fit 4 cars under. And because Mom and Dad were out, you could skateboard, ride a bike, and do all sorts of things. Standing in our carport to the left was a park. We had no neighbors on this side, so you would often see people using the footpath walking their dogs, riding, running into the night, as there were some half-decent street lamps dotted along it. If you went out our driveway, you could go straight into the park. It was a great place to grow up. This night, my brother was down the road as usual and had written his friend's number down and left us to it. I was probably into our second movie for the night when my 2 younger brothers ran in and said a man is watching them from the park near our fence. Now, normally I'd think they were playing a joke, but their faces had that different, concerned look, so I thought I better come out and have a look. We head back out to the carport, standing in the driveway looking out towards the park. There's no sign of him. There's a lightning flash and it lights up enough just outside of the carport that we see the man my brothers saw now standing in our yard watching us. We all screamed and slammed the door and ran to Mom and Dad's room, locked the door, grabbed their phone, and ran the cord from the phone into the bathroom and locked the door. We called my brother's friend's house. His friend answered and I told him there's a man in our yard. He yells out to my brother and then says we're coming up on their bikes. The wait was probably not even 5 minutes till they arrived, but it felt like ages. When they left, my brother told his friend's parents, and they called the police and came up as well. We came back out of the house when they arrived calling out to us. When they arrived, they said the man was gone. Soon after the police arrived and then another vehicle that went up through the park. It was sort of a scary night, but the police searched our house for us, and the yard, and the streets, at the park, and it seemed pretty reassuring at the time to me that my big brother was fearless and always looked out for us. Having him come back home was just as reassuring as the police being there. My parents arrived home not long after, with 2 police cars at our house, and the neighbors in the driveway. My brother's friend's parents were there as well. This was not during the time of the mobile phones, so I'm thinking what they were wondering had happened as they came into our driveway, probably with their hearts racing. I don't recall hearing if the man was ever found or caught. Years later, when I moved out, my younger brothers took over my room. My dad told me one night my younger brother woke up my mom and dad, white as a ghost, and said a man was standing at his window. The man woke him up saying, "Hey boy, are your parents home?" My parents never told any of us that at the time, but the timeline fit with them changing the real big open window fly screen we had to glass, levers with metal and break-in bars. I was inspired to share this after another poster shared the story of their awesome dog, and I had to tell the story of my hero too. This was about a year ago. I'd just gotten married, and though we were rich with love, we were far from rich financially. We lived in a dilapidated old house my husband had borrowed from his late grandparents' estate till we got on our feet. It was in a bad neighborhood, but we were surrounded by good people. I grew up in a crime-riddled country, and honestly, most of the USA, even the bad areas, are heaven in comparison. So I was cautious but never completely uncomfortable. My husband is a firefighter, so he works 24 hours at a time. My biggest comfort was our 65-pound pit bull. Her name is Candy. She's a sweetheart unless you're a squirrel and would never hurt you. She'd taken a liking to me since I moved in when my husband started working 24-hour shifts. She would follow me all around the house, never leaving my side. One evening a storm broke out. They make Candy nervous, so when she started acting up, I didn't think too much of it. I was playing video games when I heard a tap at the window. Every time I paused the game, it would stop. I assumed a tree was hitting the window in the wind, but decided to switch off the light and TV in that room just in case. I went to let Candy out for her last potty break. As soon as I opened the back door, she dashed to the right, to my horror, towards the window that the tree was tapping on. I didn't hear anything weird, and the yard was too dark to see anything. I called her back in and locked everything. I sent my husband a message, but he was on call and didn't get back to me for a while. Candy and I went to bed. I must have dozed off for a while, but I was awoken to Candy growling really low and deep. I never heard anything like it. I knew something was up as soon as I heard it. I stood up and grabbed a machete and stood still listening. Then Candy went ballistic, running from window to window through the house, barking and growling. I was dialing my father-in-law, knowing he would get here before the police, when I heard a window smash in another room. Candy was there in a flash, although I desperately tried to call her back, afraid they'd shoot her or hurt her. I heard a scream and more smashing glass, and then yelling getting further away. Then, silence. I crept to the window and there was blood everywhere. Candy had a bloody shirt sleeve in her mouth. She'd been nicked jumping out the broken window, but was otherwise unharmed. My husband and uncle arrived minutes later. We never called the police. I wanted to, but they are untrusting of local police in general, and were also scared Candy would get put down. Needless to say, Candy got a puppuccino and lots of love. We moved pretty quickly after that. Rescue dogs are a special kind of wonderful. The scariest part of this is their persistence, even though they could surely hear the dog losing it. My theory is that they were local and had met Candy out on a walk, seen how friendly and social she was, and hoped that she wouldn't actually attack. The other theory is that my husband had a really crazy ex who was stalking him relentlessly at the time. She could have told someone that the dog is loud but not aggressive. That's a little far-fetched, though, I think. Wonderful rescue dog that saved me from a bad man with seriously messed up intentions. Thank you forever. Thanks for listening. Make sure to subscribe, like, and comment. Stay sinful.